Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 1st of Feb 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. For the rest of the month, you're going to be hearing Feb. I'm sorry, for some reason I have a problem with the word February. When I try and say it at speed, I always screw it up. I don't know. You've probably got a word that you always screw up every now and again when you try and say it quickly. That's mine. That's my bane. That's my problem. February. What a horrible word. Who the hell came up with that one anyway? So yes, 1st of Feb. We're doing business speak, yo. Coming up in the show, Grand Theft Auto 5's release date slips to September. Gabe Newell claims that Apple is the biggest threat to the Steambox. After about 5 billion years, a director has been chosen for the Warcraft movie, and there will be no Wii U price drop on the way anytime soon, according to Nintendo. In a move that's no doubt going to disappoint the short-sighted, aka shareholders, GTA 5 has slipped from its April to May release date all the way down to September 17th, a confirmed date 2013. Now, last year they were claiming it would be a spring release, which is most likely going to be the April and May slot, which is where they've released previous games such as Red Dead Redemption, LA Noire, and Max Payne 3, and it's worked out pretty well for them apparently in the past. However, this time around they decided, no, we need more time to actually deal with it. The founder of Rockstar, Sam Houser, said, Grand Theft Auto 5 continues to push the series forward in new ways. Rockstar North are creating our deepest, most beautiful, and most immersive world yet. We are very excited for people to learn more about the game in the coming months. So, in other words, nothing but PR fluff. Hey. It would be nice to actually get a reasonable reason for it, but honestly, all I really need to hear from any games company is, it ain't bloody ready yet, come back later. And especially when it's not exactly a big push in terms of the release date either. We're not talking about 2014 here, we're talking about a few months. It would appear that Take-Two's investors were not happy with this. The stocks today for Take-Two were down 7%, which is not exactly a huge number, but it is definitely a hit, which is no doubt as a result of that. Well, I can't say that I'm particularly sorry for the investors, especially if they're getting all upset that this game is going to be delayed until it's actually good. I am quite sick and tired of games being shoved out early and then having to be patched over the months and not actually getting to that point. I want my game to work on day one, and how unreasonable is that exactly? Some people say, oh, well, that's just not the reality of the industry anymore. Well, quite frankly, I stick by the notion that a product should be fit for purpose and hopefully content complete. I know, it may be an outdated thing, but what can I say? I'm old school. I quite like it when my games work when I buy them. That's always nice. And we've heard the old quote thousands of times before, but at the end of the day, a bad game is bad forever. A delayed game is only delayed until it actually comes out. Just paraphrasing, of course, but as far as I'm concerned, it's good that this is being held back. Something of the size of GTA is pretty damn important to get right. It also could potentially mean that time has been put aside for a PC release, which would be kinda neat. However, in a recent interview with IGN, they stated that everything is up for consideration right now, and that is all that they can actually tell us. So, we still don't have a PC version confirmed yet. There are rumors and speculation surrounding it based on the fact that an animator for Rockstar by the name of Ryan Schachter listed on his LinkedIn profile that he was developing cutscene animation for Grand Theft Auto 5 on 360, PS3, and PC. So that's an interesting idea. Hopefully they don't screw it up, because let's be honest, GTA 4's vanilla release was nothing short of terrible on the PC and is still dodgy on a variety of different systems, so hopefully they get that right. But as far as I'm concerned, a delay is pretty much good for all games, and I don't ever see any particularly large reasons not to have a delay, especially if it's to improve the title. If investors get upset over that, well, that really doesn't matter to us, because quite frankly, the investors' interests are not the gamers' interests, right? They would like this game to be shoved out as quickly as possible because they know it's going to make a lot of money anyway, and as a result, they will make money back in their investment. Gamers are not interested in seeing the game shoved out as soon as possible unless they're horribly short-sighted fanboys, in which case they can go to hell anyway, and they are interested in a content-complete and properly functional, polished game, which they will get if studios are given the time to actually do it. During a lecture given at the University of Texas, Gabe Newell stated that the forthcoming Steambox is not in fact in competition with and threatened by consoles, it is actually being threatened by Apple. An interesting point of view, certainly, and he justifies that by saying that the threat right now is Apple because it's gained a huge amount of market share and has a relatively obvious pathway towards entering the living room with their platform. I think there's a scenario where we see sort of a dumbed-down living room platform emerging, and I think that Apple rolls the console guys pretty easily. The question, he says, is can we make enough progress in the PC space to establish ourselves there and also figure out better ways of addressing mobile before Apple takes over the living room? Interesting statement, and quite frankly, not as outlandish as it seems. Some of you might say, oh, well, there's no way that Apple can compete in the living room with Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo. Well, I don't think you're necessarily right there. It seems like the further we go on with technology when it comes to smartphones and tablets, the more integrated these things can actually be with your living room hardware, mostly your television. The ability to actually play movies via your tablet from the television can be done via an HDMI cable, and it can also be done with an Apple TV box via the AirPlay system. And it seems like it's only going to be a matter of time before those devices can directly stream to the television without the need for additional hardware. Now, when that happens, you can safely say, oh, well, I have a device that would allow me to simply do everything I want already, so why on earth would I bother with something like a Steambox? At which point, Apple kind of locks down the living room, right? And even if the gaming experience is inferior, it doesn't matter because of the ubiquity of the platform, because of how many iPhones there are. It doesn't matter how many 360s and PlayStation 3s there are, they are outnumbered by Apple devices. So if they become the primary living room gaming and media platform, then you're in a bit of trouble, because it's going to mean that the big three start to struggle, and potentially we end up with a really dumbed down gaming living room space, which would be awful. It really, really would. I don't know about you, but personally, I don't want to see the living room be dominated by games like Angry Birds. I want the hardware in place that can actually play more complex games and get people into some really rich and interesting, complex and deep experiences. You generally don't find that on the iPad, mostly due to the fact that developers are not rewarded for creating it, and the hardware itself is not designed around it because it doesn't have a proper interface for all that kind of thing. It's interesting, really, isn't it, considering we've had discussions about how much Apple really cares about gaming. Honestly, it doesn't seem like they do a huge amount, but they have dominance in that space anyway when it comes to more casual games, and there's an entire demographic of people that just play games on iOS and really just don't care about any other platform. So I think that, honestly, this view by Newell is very, very smart, and it seems like it's a broader approach to the whole thing, and getting control of the living room with smart devices, media centers, and HTPCs is most likely going to be a battle that's going to be going on while the next generation of console war continues. And one has to wonder, of course, just how successful these new consoles actually will be. Analysts are predicting doom across the board, which is really interesting and kind of odd to say the least, but we'll have to see just how advanced these systems are and whether they really capture the public's imagination. The saga of the Warcraft movie continues. We haven't heard a lot about this since Sam Raimi turned around and said, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore, and that was mid-2012. It would appear, however, that it has acquired a new director in the form of Duncan Jones. This is the guy that directed Moon and Source Code, which were both pretty fantastic in my honest opinion. I wouldn't trust my honest opinion on movies, though. I have a legendary bad taste in them. I love stupid movies. I really, genuinely do adore them very much. But if you don't trust me, then trust the critics, because both Moon and Source Code had pretty good critical reception. Now, the question is whether or not the Warcraft movie is actually going to suck. So, a tweet here by the director Duncan Jones. He says, so the gauntlet was thrown down ages ago. Can you make a proper movie of a video game? I've always said it's possible. Got to do it now. Yes, indeed. This thing was announced a long time ago, 2007. Just bear this in mind. I remember the announcement, actually, and all of the buzz surrounding it. But it's been going back and forth and back and forth. It would appear now that production is going to kick off this fall, and they're going to be looking for a planned release of 2015. Chris Metzen is going to be the co-producer. Now, whether you think that's a good or a bad thing, I suppose, really depends on what you believe happened with the storyline development of World of Warcraft over the last few years, which he was pretty much responsible for. But what I will say is it's a pretty good job that you have someone from the game actually working on the movie that has some kind of writing experience, even if it's only in video games. So I suppose the question is, can you make a good video game movie? The answer is you can. It has been done before. But there are two different ways of doing it. The first way of doing it is to stay very loyal to the actual game itself and create a movie that the guys that like the game would really enjoy. This generally doesn't work very well. There are very few instances of this actually occurring, and I think the best example is probably Silent Hill. So if you didn't like Silent Hill, well, as you can see, it's pretty damn difficult to pull this off. The second way of doing it is to deviate significantly from the game. Now, in this instance, what you generally get is a bit of a better action movie, but you get a weaker connection to the video game. Some examples of movies that were okay, watchable, not great, but certainly not awful, would be Prince of Persia, would be Hitman, would to a lesser degree, and I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this, would be the Resident Evil series. There's not really much going on in Resident Evil. It's anything to do with the games, really. But they're watchable. And they make a lot of money. They honestly do. And that actually completely freaks me out. It scares the crap out of me. But, man, even Resident Evil Afterlife and Retribution, they made like 3-4 times the budget. They do this every single time. You probably can't believe this. Resident Evil Retribution cost $65 million to make and rated $221 million in the box office. Afterlife, same thing, $296 million. It's amazing, really, when you think about it. Absolutely mind-boggling. But again, those are movies that don't really have an awful lot to do with the games, and they are actually successful. The question is, where does he actually end up going with this? Does he go for a generic mass appeal, whereby they dilute the universe down into some fairly generic kind of story? Or do they go for something very specific that is not necessarily likely to attract anyone other than the fan base of the actual games? Or are they able to capture that very rare, and by rare I mean this has never bloody happened, hybrid, whereby they're able to appeal to a mass audience and yet actually have a plot that really resonates with the fans of the series? Tricky. Very tricky. They've got a good director though, and it ain't Uwe Boll, so that's probably for the best. And finally, the president of Nintendo has indicated that the Wii U will not be receiving a price drop anytime soon. He is quoted as saying, "We are not planning to perform a markdown. I would like to make this point absolutely clear." This comes following a cut in sales projections for the full fiscal year for the Wii U and 3DS, which might very well be quite surprising considering the current runaway success with the 3DS in both Japan and Western nations. However, it should also be noted, of course, that the 3DS's success is due in part to a fairly significant price cut, which resulted in fairly substantial losses to the company. We should also bear in mind that the Wii U is a system that they are selling below manufacturing costs, which is a very rare thing for Nintendo. Generally speaking, they sell their hardware at a profit. This has not happened with the 3DS due to the price slash, and is not currently happening with the Wii U. Satoru Iwata continued to say, "Given that it has now become clear that we have not yet fully communicated the value of our product, we will try to do so before the software lineup is enhanced, and at the same time, work to enrich the software lineup, which could make consumers understand the appeal of the Wii U." And that's the real trick, isn't it? This is, of course, why the DS and the Wii were successful to begin with, because they were able to make this message resonate with the consumers. The whole notion of the motion controls, as well as the dual screen, and the way that they marketed it to an entirely new demographic of gamers was extremely effective. Combine that, of course, with the 3DS's exceptional software library for hardcore gamers, and the fact that the Wii just sold to everyone for no apparent reason, and you have a recipe for success. However, they are trying to replicate that with the 3DS and the Wii U, and they're not quite there yet, especially not with the Wii U. I feel at the moment the software library is probably the biggest problem. There's a lot of games on there that are simply also available for other consoles. We need to see unique experiences for both casual and core gamers on that system. judging by the Nintendo Direct trailers, it looks like that's exactly what we're going to be getting. And if we do end up getting those titles as well as the core first-party releases that are always system sellers, then we'll be in a good position. If, of course, we don't, then they could continue to hemorrhage money, which would certainly not be good, and I don't really think anyone wants to see Nintendo in financial trouble. They're also in a really weird position. I have to wonder how many people are just hanging on and biding their time to see what the offerings from Microsoft and Sony are actually going to be before deciding whether or not to pick up one of these things. This is one of the doubts that many people expressed regarding the Wii U, that it's released at this really awkward spot where it's in between generations, and it could very well fall behind. In order to prevent that from happening, they must of course make use of the unique features of the Wii U and actually produce an extremely good software lineup that utilizes the touchpad and all of the other stuff. The reason behind that, of course, is that the system is quite clearly going to be underpowered in comparison to the stuff that's coming from Sony and Microsoft, but that never stopped them with the Wii, and it's never stopped them with the DS either. They must exploit that and not try to compete on the power stakes. And let's see if they can do that over the course of the next 6 months before we hear a great deal about all of the new consoles coming from Sony and Microsoft. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. That also wraps us up for the week for this particular show. I will of course be back on Monday with yet more gaming news and comment. Thank you very much for watching. Please have a safe and wonderful weekend, and I will see you next time.